I'll jump right into our return to play so we can get to all the questions part. That's what we want to get to. We've done a few return to play town halls. So this is not a new slide and not a new list, but I will go through it because it's important to know and important to understand what goes into the return to play and why and how it can keep changing. So obviously we have to follow government regulations. We're always have to take care of the public health authorities. And along with that, your local public health authorities. So make sure that we're in compliance there. We always are in contact with insurance to make sure they're on side with as we progress into our return to play. And the legal is very helpful to get the review on this, as the government regulations are pretty tricky to maneuver through. So we'll also talk a little bit about that. And then we also have to deal with our national sport body, Volleyball Canada. And then you're also, in order to get back into action, you're going to have to follow and adhere to your facilities and permit issuers. So there's an additional appendix that was just added on this version. I forgot to write the letter. I'm going to say Appendix J, but it's the last one. And it gives you the back to operations and some questions to ask your facilities and what you need to provide facilities in order to get return to play. So just keep in mind your return to play protocol for outdoor and indoor. It's a tool. It's a tool to take to your facility, to who issues your permits, to say, hey, here's how our sport's going to run. This is the protocol we're going to follow. Can we run this in your facility? And I went backwards. My mistake. So just to talk a little about the local public health, always be familiar and comply, not only with the provincial, but with the local requirements of your public health. We have been sending our return to play protocol, the very early versions, and we'll continue to update them to the local public health authorities. We check in with them. We share it, we see if they have any further recommendations. If there are, we will send them to the clubs in that area. But the most important feedback we've been getting from the local public health is utilize their educational resources and any of the fact sheets they have. It's there, they're great, and that's what will help to help share the education side on how to keep everyone safe. Our national sport body, Volleyball Canada, we've had to comply obviously with their return to play. So there's a progression. We are now, I'm gonna have to move my screen here. So we are now in their phase 2 and 3, because we also can get into a bit of small group competitions. So where our version 1 return to play protocol was just individual training and skill work, our version 2 of this return to play, and I know there's many different versions, phases, stages, but the important thing is we're in line and we are right up to the small group competitions. And it's still like all of the public health that you've been hearing, outdoors deemed safer than indoors. So if you have a choice, go outdoors, keep your group size to a minimum, keep volleyballs designated for a group. So then, and then obviously clean them, but make sure that you're not mixing volleyballs between groups. Well, Volleyball Canada wants you to eliminate unnecessary contact. It's required for our government regulations. So again, that was easy. Always maintain good hygiene. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on some of the provinces. Some of those questions came in on what are other provinces doing? How are they managing? What's happening there? We could spend a couple hours on that. So it's very different. Each province has different restart plans, and they also use different strategies. So if you're curious in a province that's close to how our protocol works, it's actually Alberta. So they're working in a cohort, they can train and they play within a cohort of up to 50, unless they've changed those numbers, but that's the latest that I know. So we do we're in contact with all the provinces, but we are in contact with Volleyball Alberta about how things are going for them, what activity are they working on, and we obviously check the numbers, make sure they're not slipping, and we'll see how things are going. So that's an interesting look at that, but it's also Quebec is actually further ahead that as their progression. So that's another province, if you're curious, we do keep an eye and on Quebec as well. Insurance. So as I said, we have our insurance company, our broker has reviewed our return to play protocol. They are on side with it, but they're very clear with us. If the protocol isn't followed, because it ties in with the government regulations, there would not be insurance. So make sure this is the follow the return to play protocol. Send us the acknowledgement that you are going to follow the return to play protocol. And then there's insurance from the OVA available to you. And it was very simple. I remember when the insurance broker explained it to me, it's like, well, we don't insure illegal activity. So if the government regulations are followed, it would be considered illegal activity. And that would pretty much nullify your insurance. So I'm like, ooh, got it. So keep that in mind and just be diligent. And because COVID also is excluded from our insurance policy. So keep in mind that you need to cover off the return to play protocol and you have to mitigate risk wherever you can. And that's part of being just diligent and not being negligent. So keep that in mind, and any questions on insurance, always send them in because there's very different scenarios and questions and adding additional insured. And don't hesitate to contact Sherry Bennett at info@ontariovolleyball.org, and she will pass it. If she can't answer it, she will pass it down to our Director of Finance, Jen Harkness, who will get the answers straight from our insurance broker. So looking at our government regulations, I know we all know what physical distancing is, but I just wanted to be very clear. All through stage 3 in our government's re-engagement plan, physical distancing is required. There's no social circle that you can say, okay, well, we're all in a social circle, so we can now do an organized activity. That doesn't apply. So you can't jump into a social circle and say, oh, I can now do a training activity. Doesn't work that way. So physical distancing must be maintained. So just keep that in mind as we move through this, because then we'll layer in our exceptions and where we can breach. So gathering sizes has been increased. As you know, for outdoors, 100, but indoors, 50. Now, what they also did is they added 50 spectators. So it's 50 participating in the organized activity, and then there's also 50 spectators. But there's always buts in these. The facility may not be able to hold that many or may not be able to accommodate spectators, because everyone must be able to maintain their physical distancing, being able to exit and enter the facility. If they were watching, is there a venue that has enough space for that many people to watch? So you really have to look to your facility and then see what can be accommodated. So stage 3 regions, as we said, physical distancing is still required. There's gathering sizes that are different from outdoor and indoor. And then they've layered in another piece. This is the team sport piece that is obviously critical for team sports, but for volleyball, because it does give us the opportunity to play. So the government regulation is that team sports may be practiced or played within a facility if they do not allow for physical contact between the players. So, or you have to modify to avoid physical contact between the players. So this is where, while a team sport is being played or practiced, we can have these breaches of physical distancing, but we cannot have physical contact. So here's where we're at. Now we get to move on to, we'll describe that, how we're gonna play volleyball with that. So the other piece of the team sport that they put out was leagues. This is their attempt to try to bring back some sports with some leagues, but 50 participants is not very many, as we know. So that is all that is allowed. So if a league is going to be run, you can only have 50 participants in total. Now you can divide and have multiple groups of 50. So you could have, if you have a league that runs on different nights and you split them into 50 per night, that's fine if the facility can accommodate it. If it's an outdoor facility and you can have 100 and you have enough space, then you could run 2 groups of 50. But those leagues cannot play each other. So if there's individuals that are within a league, they have to stay and only play in that one league. So they're really looking to not mix participants. So with all those rules, how do you comply with our return to play protocol? We have a list here, and I understand we're also going to be publishing a checklist, which should help you to just check off to make sure you do have everything that you need. First off, when you're looking at returning to play, there's a risk mitigation assessment checklist. You need to complete it. It gives you a really good idea of different things to consider, how to manage the protocol, and then you can share that risk mitigation with your facility and say, you know, you've run through this mitigation assessment. I have my PSO's return to play protocol. One of the next things is completing the OVA's acknowledgement form, which provides you with your insurance and understanding of the return to play. If you have any questions, obviously let us know. Education is a very important part of the return to play. Obviously, doing this town hall, you see that there's a lot of information, and the return to play is quite comprehensive. There's a lot of things to know, a lot of things to follow, and there's a lot to things to consider to even put together a return to play protocol. So who do you need to share that with, right? The participants, the coaches. You need to know how your facility wants you to operate. So all of those protocols and education around COVID, what's going to happen, and what will your response plan be, all of that needs to be educated and shared with any participant, any of your organizers. So a lot of the clubs have been doing a great job running Zoom calls before they're going to have a session, make sure everyone knows what's our protocol, how are we going to safely exit and enter the facility, get our health screening done, which is some of the other requirements as we get down to the bottom, our participant tracking, how all that will happen. And so sharing that information is really important, not only to keep our participants safe, but it's also an important part of some individuals feeling comfortable enough to re-engage. So it's another piece of making sure that some parents will not willingly sign their child up for any of the sports because they're a little worried. So, excuse me, so just keep that in mind, that the knowledge is also part of the power and the participation piece of bringing people back to our sport. So obviously, there's a waiver that needs to be completed for COVID. So that's something that if you are operating prior to August 31st, even if the member signed the OVA waiver at the beginning of the year, you will still need this waiver for COVID. If you are doing all the waiver paperwork, the concussion awareness, all of those things starting in September, the waiver COVID will be included in that documentation. But just keep in mind there is now an additional waiver component for COVID. Health screening has to happen before there's participation in every single session. So the participant has to make sure that they've done their own health screening, not showed up if they aren't healthy, if they have any of the symptoms, and making sure that there's the participant tracking to help with the contact tracing if unfortunately something does happen. And then we'll get into our programming modifications. So the programming modifications, to tie in with the government regulations for indoor volleyball, we go back to that rule of no physical contact. So when training and playing, no deliberate physical contact is allowed. So really look to how you can do your warm-ups, have your practice plans that you can avoid, make sure that physical contact is avoided. We do have, we recognize that gameplay is allowed. So we we did look at it that there would be up to 6 active participants per side, and then a 7th with a libero switching in and out. So we have 14 athletes that are allowed per a training session on a court, on a 9x9, 9x18 court, that can be active. Scrimmages and gameplay with limited duration is allowed, as per the government regulations. Always, and I think I already mentioned this, always consider ways not to breach physical distancing. If the kids can do their warm-up, and if there's skill work that's part of your practice and it doesn't breach physical distancing, really take the time to do that. Try to limit it as much as you can. We've asked that limit session duration that includes gameplay is less than 120 minutes. And take frequent breaks, clean, sanitize hands. The guidelines are around 30 minutes, but maybe less, if that makes sense in your practice plan. So eliminate all deliberate physical contact. So obviously no high fives, handshakes, huddles. If you don't need to switch sides, don't. If you don't need to move people, consider how people are moving from drill to drill. If a coach is providing any instruction, when there's timeouts, maintain the 2 meters. Unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of reminders with the athletes, but ask them to, keep their 2 meters distance. Off court, all individuals need to respect the physical distancing. If you can, make sure there's enough space between courts, depending on the facility. And if you need to, utilize some visual cues, pylons, or different ways to remind athletes to keep some distance. So that is the return to play piece. And Kirsch, did you want to do any questions on return to play, or are you holding all of it?
For now, I'm holding the questions. We've been answering questions in the chat, either directly to persons or as part of the wider group chat, to try and mitigate the questions at the end. Also, because a lot of this stuff is answered in the FAQs document that I added to the group chat. So after Carrie has her chance to speak, I'll ask the ones that couldn't be answered.
Okay. So Carrie, I'll just keep viewing the screen if that's okay, and I'll throw it up to the next one. Don't worry, she's gonna unmute. She's gonna roll with it.
I got it. Okay, so we all know that permits are questionable come September, so we felt it really important to come up with a contingency plan for anybody who can't get permits. Obviously, we want to limit our risks to our athletes and our coaches and everybody out there to make sure that they are limiting their contact points and not jumping from tryout to tryout if we are able to hold them. And we want to make sure that we're securing team cohorts as quickly as possible. So getting the teams together in their training groups so we can start on court activity as quickly as possible. So anything that we're talking about right now with this modification application process is going to be keeping in line with our dates for the tryout window that was originally published back in, spring sometime. And we did want to keep this process very athlete driven. We wanted to make sure it was the athletes that were seeking their opportunities, and we didn't have any questionable behavior around hounding athletes to participate to their clubs. We really wanted to have them take ownership of this, and it allows for opportunities with virtual open houses and using a lot of the online stuff that we've kind of all grown to know and love over these past few months. So that's just a kind of why we're going through with this process. So. And here are some key dates with the whole tryout window modifications application process. So beginning of the year, we did extend, not the beginning of the year, the beginning of our, ever since March, or when all this COVID stuff started to happen, our first modification to the window was to extend that re-signing period. We really wanted to make sure, again, that kids were not had the opportunity to return their club, and training cohorts established quickly. Again, tryouts are very much up in the air for many of our regions. So we just extended it, try to help clubs understand the process, encourage them to use it, and let them know how valuable of a tool this really is. So that was extended into August 31st. It's been working well, I believe. And now we insert one of our modifications to the tryout policy, which was an offer for athletes who are currently training with their new club. So as we all know, come May 31st, every athlete out there is a free agent. They are free to seek other playing opportunities with other clubs, coaches, things along that line. So we wanted to insert this phase for those athletes so they can get secured to their club and sooner, and a club knows where they stand come into September. What's really important with this date is that we want the athletes to express interest to commit to that club prior to the club sending them an offer form. So it's, again, that's the athlete-driven aspect of it. So we want to make sure that the club has an email, stating that this athlete is willing to commit to them before they send them the offer. So yes, sorry, I'm just reading some notes off to the side. Yeah, so that's that part of the process. And then we're gonna jump into the open houses, which falls in line again with our previous tryout window, and that open houses, you have a chance to do something virtually, outdoors, be a little creative with how we're approaching this season. And it'll be similar to the same process that it was in years past. We will be looking to maybe put some little tips and hints onto how to run a virtual open house. I know our Team Ontario programs were a great learning process for us, and we'd like to pass that knowledge on to any club who'd be interested in it. And then we are asking to make sure that clubs will be sending in their re-signed list to the OVA office. So this is where we post all the athletes that have been re-signed to the clubs. This is not new. This was done last year. And it's done via form stack this year. So there's a link in the documents that Karish did post to this Zoom meeting for the form stack. So we're asking them to include the name, the age, division, and position. There's going to be, obviously, you can't, if multiple age divisions and positions are permitted. So again, this is also acts as a really good tool for the athletes that are looking for a new club. They can see if there's spots available, positions available, things along that line. So it's a great tool for them. And then after we post those lists, we're going to ask clubs to declare what they are looking for. So this will be a message board similar to what was done in the past. When a club posts, you're looking for a middle at 16U. You need a backward specialist at 18U boys or something like that. So it'll be posted on the OVA website, and it's done prior to the application process being started. So it's it's going to act as a tool for kids so they can go to the site and see where they can potentially apply. So it's a great way for kids to know where they want to go, who's looking for what they need, rather than just throwing something to the wall and hoping that it sticks. So yeah, and all that information on what is required for the club declaration is in the document. We're gonna list it by region and hometown alphabetically. We don't want to feel like we're giving any club priority, so we're going to keep it straight into the forward, alpha order, never fails, right? So that, and then we're the player application process. So again, this is to act as a contingency plan if you aren't able to hold tryouts, you're not able to secure gyms. So this is for any player who's interested in being selected to a new club. We are going to have a form available to them, and with some mandatory information that they should fill out, and then they can email it to the clubs. So we're going to make this form available to the athletes on September 8th, although clubs are only going to be accepting applications on the 20th. So this is just to get the kids familiar with the form, able to, get game tape together if they want, write a little, just prepare a nice document that they can send to the clubs that they really want to go to. And they are only permitted to apply for 2 clubs at a time. And that's all for obvious reasons. It would be very hard for one athlete to apply to 20 clubs, and every club is wanting to, grab this athlete. And, it's not, we need to kind of make sure that there's checks and balances in place. So we're able to, make sure that it's not all lopsided on that process. Yeah, and so clubs will have a minimum of 72 hours from the receipt of the application to respond with the following options. So you can accept the athlete, offering them a position. And then after a club accepts an offer from an athlete, they will have 24 hours to respond to the offer letter. So really, if an athlete gets accepted through their application process, it should be a no-brainer for them. They should say, yep, I'm in, let's go. And it shouldn't take more than 24 hours. Clubs can request for an interview or additional information. They can deny the application with, thanks, but no thanks type of thing. And then once an athlete is denied, they are allowed to apply to different clubs. And if a club doesn't respond within the 72 hours of receiving the application, it will be considered a deferral. So the athlete would be permitted to apply to other clubs. So again, and if you are accepting an application from an athlete and your offer letter is out there, it is valid for 24 hours unless otherwise stated on the form. So there will be another little field on that document that will allow you to extend it if need be, or but it has to be a minimum of 24 hours. And again, a non-response to an offer would be considered a no thank you. So, and their athletes should not be applying to additional clubs until the status of their current applications have been finalized, whether they've been not denied or they have to wait 20 or 72 hours for a non-response. So they shouldn't be doing anything until they know where they stand with the 2 clubs they originally applied for. So the application process can continue until your club is filled, kind of like the tryout. There's no end date. And an athlete is, again, considered officially committed to a club once they sign back that offer form. And they're not allowed to apply for any other clubs after that. And obviously, if there is, we pull in it's a violation of the policy. I'm trying to put that in fancier terms. And if a player does accept an offer and they change their mind, they have to go through the transfer and release policy. So there's a link in the document to that. So please review that. It's really important. You as a club do have the option to release or not release. Email me if you have any questions on it, but the link is there. And you are permitted to collect deposits from the signed athletes, and you can begin team activities once the offer has been accepted. And obviously everything you do has to follow the return to play protocols that we've gone through. So that's just the new tryout policy in a big nutshell. So hopefully we got that going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. I have some questions here that I know some of you would like to get answered. So I'm just going to try and direct the questions to the persons who they're in charge of. So one of them you sort of just answered, but I just want you to reinforce it, Carrie. And that is, if you sign an offer as a player, but you find that there could be a shortage of players, can they try out for another club?
So I'm guessing that they've applied to be a part of this club and there's not enough players to make the team. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, if you originally signed up for a club, whether you accept an offer or resign, and that club cannot field that team or cannot honor those terms in that offer letter, you are permitted to find another spot.
Okay, excellent. This one is, I think will probably go to Joe. So if a club finds themselves in stage 2, so no longer in stage 3 and stage 2, is the maximum 8 athletes plus 2 coaches in one gym that has 2 courts? Would that be the maximum? Or can 10 be the maximum in a single court facility?
So, great question. And it's unfortunate that we have to think about that, about possibly getting put back to stage 2 in some regions, but unfortunately that probably is a reality. So the answer, and I know this isn't what you're looking for, I don't know, because they now put the gathering size in the in that government regulation. So in the laws. So now that you'll see like the 50, the 100, it's right in the stage 3, whatever laws relate to the stage 3 communities. So if they go back to stage 2, they're going to have to issue another, it'll be a backtrack or a modification, and it'll be a whole new law. So we don't know. But yes, you can look, you can guess. This is when we start guessing, not that we have crystal balls, but what would the gathering size be? They've put indoor up to 50. Would they only dial it back to 25? Would they put it to 10? I don't know. So it would totally depend on what the government did.
Okay.
Yeah, and as soon as we hear that like any government regulations that get released, we have everything's linked on the OVA website under the big black like COVID information tab. If you click on there, all the communications will be in there. And honestly, as soon as we know, we'll send a communication out to our members to let you guys know of what the new regulations are.
And we can have another town hall.
We'll have lots.
Yeah, I think this question will definitely come up again at next week's town hall for indoor volleyball. So yeah. I've noted it down to ask for next week again to add into our presentation. Here's another one. This will be for you as well, Joe. Can we review the risk checklist? Yes, you can. I can answer that straight up. But what is considered a medical lead? Are you required to name someone? So I assume what the person is asking is, does it have to be a medical professional, like a doctor, a nurse, someone from the Public Health Authority, or could it be a club rep?
No, it can be a club rep. You can have your people that have done, I would like to think you have someone that's done their first aid and has some of that medical and health knowledge. But no, you want someone to be responsible, someone to be a lead, someone that's your go-to. And so someone that's also helping to share that information with your club. And so you can kind of, divide and conquer. There's so much happening with this COVID, and we talk about task force, but this is one that you definitely want to have people really assigned to their role.
Okay. Carrie, this one is for you. In the past years, if you do not have enough older players to field the team, you could have players play in 2 age groups. Will we be allowed to do that this year under COVID restrictions?
You know what? training size, and as long as you are, yeah, that's a great question. You are permitted to do it. I don't know if Joe and Alicia want to jump on that, but yes, you can have, we are not limiting kids playing in multiple age divisions this year. I think the trick comes in with training size. Is that, Joe, is that for you there?
Yeah, I think those are the things where obviously our goal is to find the best way to re-engage safely. So if that athlete can participate within that group and it doesn't, make it, too big of a group, then that's okay. But yeah, when you come to, we don't know what we all know this, we don't know what the competition is going to look like. We don't know where we're going to have gyms. We don't know. Right now, the size is only 50. We don't know a lot of things. So I think we just have to stay very fluid, very adaptable at this time. And if it works that athlete can train with that group, then I would definitely say go for it.
Okay. I have a few questions coming in as well, but I will get to them. I'm just going to finish out the ones that were sent either to me privately or in the group chat. This one is another difficult one that we'll probably deal with more next week, but I know that every club has this in their head, so I wanted to ask it. This might go to you, Joe. I'm not really sure who else to put this to at this moment. But for clubs that can't access gyms, so if some clubs can access gyms and some clubs can't, wouldn't that put that club that can access gyms at a disadvantage for tryouts? And do we, as the OVA management, have any suggestions on making a more level playing field for this?
Well, that is obviously the big unknown going into this year. And with things being very different regionally, that's a very real thing that will be happening. And which is what I tasked Carrie and her team with, of how are we going to do it? How are we going to get athletes involved and keep them connected and keep them continuing to be able to have some sort of athlete development that is going to be very different this year. And that's why the application process is so important. A tryout isn't going to be in a gym. We don't even know if there will be gyms. Yeah, some people may be able to get some gyms. Maybe you can run some tryouts on a grass court. But we have to be creative. We have to look to different ways to do things. And that's why it's really, really important to give athletes the opportunity to stay in our sport. And we used to, it was a different process before when you re-sign, and you may not re-sign because tryouts are coming. We don't know that tryouts are coming because there might not be any gyms. So, I would re-sign as many players as you can, not just for your club, but for our sport, and to keep those athletes involved. It looks like right now a lot of the school boards aren't even going to be able to run sports for the kids. That's I wouldn't have passed school. I wouldn't have made it. Playing sports was such an important part. So for them to have, even if your club team meets virtually, that's going to be important for them. That's going to be really, really important. I know my kids are teenagers playing through. The opportunity to connect online virtually with their team was very important. And being involved in some things during the summer virtually really made a big difference. So I really think the fall is going to be a lot more of that until things settle down and we figure out, hopefully maybe schools will start to issue. I don't know, I'm probably hoping. But we really have to make other plans. And we have to really don't just throw in the towel on athlete development just because the kids can't be in the gym. Consider a different way. Just consider different options. That's there's no other, there's not, it's going to be different everywhere. There's not going to be any way to resolve that. So I'm sure Alicia and Carrie, we've talked about this at length. So I'm sure there's more that I left out of that answer.
Okay. Just a couple more questions. Carrie, this one is for you. If a club has more than one team in an age group, does a resigning offer have to be team specific or is it club specific?
Anything that's on the offer letter is mandatory, and for like the re-signing offer is mandatory. There is a caveat for other conditions on the offer form. So you can put in, with the, for the red team with potential to move up to the blue team or something like that. I think it's really important to make sure that you're very clear with when you're re-signing an athlete and what you are offering them. If you are not able to deliver on anything that is in that form, then it voids it. So any field that's on that offer form is mandatory, with the little optional, little field where you can put other conditions in on that offer.
Okay, and the last question, this also goes for you, Carrie, and probably a bit for me as well. This one deals with kids who are in the 11 to 12 age range, and I'm assuming possibly younger as well, if you're involved in some of your rep teams at that age. How are we going to get the younger athletes involved when they are in the 11 to 12 range? If they've not played before, will there be a way to have a tryout for those athletes?
If you can have a gym, you can have a tryout, obviously, if you abide by the return to play protocol. There's other ways to engage people and to let them know about your experiences and what your club has to offer. And that's why these open houses become very important. Even if it's just a virtual Zoom meeting like this, it's a great way to, an athlete can get an understanding of what your club is and what their experience might be like. We struggled with that as well. I'm not going to lie. We know that entry point and application process is very difficult for those younger athletes. However, it's one of the only ways we felt we could get our teams settled in September without any permits, is to have this application process.
Yeah. I know from my end, a lot of the clubs that have grassroots programs, what they've told me is that for the younger age groups, they are going outdoor as much as possible, especially if this is the first time that they've played sport. So they've not competed in a house league. It's absolute beginners. But kids that still want to try out for a rep team, they're doing their best to do an outdoor tryout and be more flexible with the dates. So hopefully that helps that answer as well. And the last question, this one will go to Joe. How will the leagues of 50 be determined?
Well, great question, because we don't have any. So I'm saying it, so we don't know. We don't know what competition will look like. I see there's another question in here. Is January 1st still the planned start date for competitions? Yes. We would love it to be, but obviously it's going to be whether we have gyms, what the government regulations will be. Will the gathering size have been increased? Will the league size be increased? I'm going to throw in a little more info about the government regulation and leagues. Hockey is pushing hard to increase the number from 50, because obviously that's not a very big hockey league for them to have only 3 hockey teams. So that's something that is in the works, along with same thing for basketball, and the same thing would apply for us. Now, if the gathering size increases, then we could have a tournament with more, if the facility would allow us to. So we will be trying to do whatever we are allowed to do based on the government regulations. So I'm sure Alicia typed an answer in there too, around those same things, and comps team, if you have any more to add to that. But we're looking at different ways that we can run competitions. Beach has moved to a friendly format that works right now for us, that complies with the government regulations. It's wonderful to see the athletes out there getting a chance to play some games with smiles on their faces and playing the sport again that we love. So that may be some of what indoor is. And if we can start a competition series in January, that is our plan. And hopefully that is what will happen. I'm sure Alicia, you put more information in the chat.
Yeah, I did. I was like, even to add to that, Joe, too, I know even if, by some miracle, the cases disappear and we're allowed to have 250 people come November for an indoor event, we'll be working with the IVDC, which is Indoor Volleyball Development Committee, and our Regional President's Council to make sure we have safe formats that, that we're being a responsible association. It's great that we can run events, but we want to make sure that we're checking all of the boxes and following protocols. And we will try and run some events earlier if we can. But once again, that's an ideal, perfect world, but we have no idea what we're going to face 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road at this point. So we just will be up to date with all the regulations and keeping you guys up to date as well. And we will be working, on 6-week cycles basically for events to make sure that we have enough time and information in place to call if we're going to run those events or not. So it's a lot of hurry up and wait. It's annoying, but it's the COVID world and reality that we're in. And we all have to remain very fluid and adaptable in this situation. So, and thank you guys for all being on the call and listening to all this information and helping plan. So thanks.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for submitting their questions in advance, and that those in the chat were also excellent questions for us as well. Definitely keep our wheels turning. If your question has not been answered, I've noted it if it was publicly or privately sent to me, and similarly for Alicia and Carrie. And we'll try to reach out to you before the next town hall. We'll review this as a staff tomorrow and say, hey, what are the answers? And we'll reach out to you directly. Thank you again for giving up another of your Monday evenings. We have a few more coming your way. Next week, we deal with indoor youth competitions with a lot more info than what you heard tonight. And following that, we have a parent and player session, which of course, please spread the word more than we can on social media or our website or via newsletters, and get your parents involved because we'd love to hear from them. They're the ones who have fast ask questions to us, and if they can get them to us before the session, it would be great. And of course, later in September, we have our coach eligibility and coach development town hall as well. LP mentioned that last week. So thank you, everyone, and I hope to see you again next Monday, same time. And you can find the link on our main page of our website or on any of our social media links. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, team.